going to be diving into the spread of Islam. It's going to be kind of a cool journey. We had the great luxury of getting to interview actually some practicing Muslims as well as a native Mallorquin that will explain what that looked like in Mallorca when they were invaded. We're going to look at the good, bad, and the ugly, the innovation. But right now we're about to take off to the Mediterranean, and we will have some really cool experiences there where we will talk about what happened during this time. So wheels up, and we'll see you when we get there.
As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will indeed bless him, make him fruitful, and give him a multitude of descendants. He will become the father of 12 princes. I will make him into a great nation.
All right, everybody, our wheels are down, and we have the Mediterranean behind us, one of the most beautiful bodies of water in the world, and also a center point of history during the 7th through the 13th century, which is really the golden age of Islam. And what we're talking about, of course, as spoken about earlier, is we are going to talk about the rapid spread of Islam and how it happened, what took place, and the reason for it. In this, we're really going to focus on three key things. We're going to focus on who is Muhammad, how did the trade routes influence that, and how was economics a big part of the growth and the spread of the culture itself, and then, of course, the conquest. And one of the reasons I really wanted to film this here was my family is actually Spanish, and we will be going with the Mallorquin here in Mallorca up to one of the Moorish towers, and they will talk about what that was like, how that looked. Granted, they were clearly not alive during the time, but the stories have been passed down, and it's really cool to hear the history in a way that really brings it to life. But to get started, as I said, we're going to talk about Muhammad first. Muhammad was born in Mecca around 570 AD. He was raised by his grandfather, and then later he ended up being raised by his uncle. The city he grew up in, Mecca, was really known for trade and religious diversity. And you know, it kind of paints a good picture, a good starting point of what we're talking about, because ultimately he did build a religion, a faith, and a nation in and of itself. So anyways, just to kind of keep going from there, his grandfather was very politically intertwined in the Quraysh tribe and was a leader, and his uncle was a merchant. Anyways, we move forward. For the first 20 years of Muhammad's life, he was a merchant. He really gained a lot of experience with, earning a reputation for honesty and trustworthiness. And he traveled all over Syria, the Indian Oceans. He really solidified his nickname, which was Al-Aman, meaning faithful and trustworthy. And that's really where his journey begins to start. Muhammad himself was a very deeply religious man and would embark on pilgrimages to sacred sites near Mecca. It was during one such journey in 610 that a profound experience occurred. While meditating in a cave in Mount Jabal al-Nur, the angel Gabriel appeared and conveyed the words of God. He was initially taken back, but Muhammad eventually embraced the message and felt compelled to share it with others. Really, this sets the tone for how every religion is built. At least if you study history of religions, there is that turning point, that one pivotal moment, and this is the pivotal moment for Muhammad. All right, so I wanted to go ahead and take a quick second to stop and kind of let you know, and I put it in there in writing at the beginning of the video. There was a couple of practicing Muslim folks that I was supposed to interview. Unfortunately, they both canceled on me. But fortunately, I have a friend of mine who is a practicing Muslim. Actually, I hadn't talked in a while to him, so it was a great excuse to reach out. and he would not do an interview, but he did send me a text message. So I'm just going to read the text message to you. I might not read it verbatim, but you can look at it if you pause the YouTube movie. So anyways, he goes, "Hey, sorry, I can't meet with you, but hopefully this will help you out." First thing he says is Jesus prophesies Muhammad in Mark 1:7, "There cometh after me he that is mightier than I." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father." Okay, so he basically is saying that Jesus prophesies Muhammad. The next thing he said is Muhammad has many similarities with Moses. They both received comprehensive law, faced enemies, and emerged victorious through miracles. They were accepted as prophets and leaders, migrated due to assassination plots, and had natural births and family lives. Unlike Jesus, who was seen as the Son of God, Muhammad was recognized as a prophet, making him more like Moses. The next part of this text says, "From Ishmaelites, the prophet was not to come from the Jewish people themselves, but from their brothers, the Ishmaelites. Muhammad, a descendant of Ishmael, fulfills this criteria." And then finally, he says in this text, God's words in his mouth. Muhammad received the Holy Quran directly from God through the angel Gabriel. These words were dictated to him and written down by his companions. The Quran begins most chapters with "In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful," fulfilling the prophecy that the prophet would speak in the name of God. He also says he found this webpage that might help. I actually ended up using it for some information, so it really worked out well. So anyways, sad that we couldn't do the interview, but it was interesting to get the take as to why a practicing Muslim believes what they believe and they're faithful and whatnot. I think it gives us some insights into the religion itself. All right, so now we've established what turning point was that caused him to begin his ministries. Gabriel, the angel, talked to him, start pouring the word of God into him. He has this epiphany, right? Or at least allegedly has this epiphany. So we kind of go from there. He starts to get his first set of followers, refuses to abandon his post, so to speak, of preaching his word or the word of God as he knows it, or of Allah. And he virtually ends up kind of causing some wars. Not virtually, he literally causes some wars, because he's taking a place that's economy thrives off of idol worship and polytheism, and said that it's all bad and that that's not the way and Allah's the way and there's only one way. So we see several battles between 624 and 628. Muhammad's forces, however, triumph in the Battle of the Trenches and Siege of Medina. Sorry, my pronunciation's horrible, but give me a break. Then there was a treaty signed, but it was broken. The balance shifted, though, and in 630, the Muslim army marched into Mecca with minimal casualties. Muhammad did something unique, though, in the sense that he showed forgiveness and granted amnesty to almost all that opposed him. And then they destroyed all the pagan idols. Ultimately, this was a significant turning point where we can now start to march forward and to talking about the other aspects of Islam. We will touch on a few things to show some similarities between, each of the religions, and how it could be easy, I guess, to tweak the wrench, so to speak, tap on the boat and make the engine turn on, to kind of have cultures integrate as you see people on their pilgrimages and they start to migrate to different territories and the cultures slowly integrate. That was a part of it as well. So we're going to look at all of that, but we're about to start diving into the next phase of what we're going to be talking about today, and I hope y'all stay with me on this journey. It's going to be fun.
Deuteronomy 18, I will raise up from them a prophet like you. From among their brothers I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. If anyone does not listen to my words that the prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call him to account.
So as promised, I'm going to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly throughout this thing, but I think it's time that we move away from the good. And I wanted to keep this as non-biased as possible, at least at the beginning, to build a picture of the faith aspect, because that is ultimately the way a message spreads, the way a cult is formed, the way religions are formed. It's through the concept and ideals of someone providing information, providing something that touches someone's heart. But the reality is, if we really want to look at Islam, people, and culture, the spread really comes down to the fact that the trade routes through the Mediterranean and through Asia and through all the different areas that it ran through, the Islams were actively involved in horses and slaves, sugar, salt, textiles, and there was just an economic reason for this growth. And you saw the migrations and, the pilgrimages that took place from it. You had preachers moving. There were so many other things that transpired, but this beautiful body of water, generally speaking, played a huge role in that. And in fact, in this video specifically, we're going to skip ahead, and I think the best way to learn about the conquest is by having a true visual. And like I said before, we're going to have a Mallorquin that's going to be speaking. My family is actually Mallorquin, so there's a personal touch to this. And to be frank with you, you can follow the money and you can follow the blood, and there's a lot of that and the real story of the spread of Islam.
All right, what you're seeing now is the trade routes and the correlation between the trade routes with the growth of the Islamic culture from the 7th through the 13th century. And this is something we're going to talk a little bit about.
So as I said, you got to follow the money. So we saw that a lot with the way these trade routes look. If you look at that map, we'll refer back to it in a second. But also it was unique in the sense that, most people are hopefully not inherently bad. So there was slow integration of culture as well. You'd have people taking their pilgrimages, you'd have missionaries moving through there, spreading the word like other religions. But there was, of course, the conquering side of it. But one thing that was very unique about the Muslim armies of the time is most of them ran pretty small. They're 3,000 to 4,000 people, which is not a huge army. They just happened to be really good at war. So we saw this vast growth during this period of time. And again, it was very economically driven. I mean, what can you say? Everybody likes to make a little bit of money, and there was money to be made by being a party to growing this religion, growing this culture, and growing them along the economic centers during the time period. And a lot of people don't give enough credit to the Muslims and the Arabs and everything else during the Renaissance even. During the Renaissance, the art that came from that came from the money that was being funded by the Arab nations. We saw the Turks played a large role in funding a lot of the artwork. So we have them to thank. Not a huge fan of the war part, not a fan of some of it, but let's be real, we all have our way of doing things, and this map is just simply painting a picture of how the religion grew and why it grew and where it grew, and the reason's pretty simple.
And now for a side fact, the 5 pillars of Islam. The declaration of faith, which includes bearing witness that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger. The performance of 5 daily prayers facing Kaaba in Mecca. These prayers are performed at specific times throughout the day. The giving of alms or charity to the poor and needy. Muslims are required to donate a portion of their wealth each year to help those less fortunate. Fasting during Ramadan from dawn until sunset. Muslims abstain from food, drink, and other physical needs during this time to focus on spiritual purification and self-discipline. The pilgrims to the holy city of Mecca, which all Muslims are physically and financially able, are obligated to undertake at least once in their lifetime. It takes place during the Islamic month of Dhul Hijjah.
So I'm on my way up to the Moorish Towers. Right now we'll be interviewing a native Mallorquin a little bit later, and they're going to tell stories that were passed down as well as stories that were learned in school. That's required curriculum. But it's really cool for everybody to get to see this site, because this is a way to protect the town against Islamic invaders. And the Mallorquins would light the tower to let them know that they were coming. And I'm gonna show you the tower now. I'm gonna flip my camera around to where you can see. So we're sitting here with local Carlos Riera, and we will be doing a little bit of a voiceover where he's going to talk through as we see the pictures and video. Anyways, all right, here we go.
So the talayas are these defensive towers that are in all the coastline from Mallorca, and these towers used to be light up when the island was attacked by all the Moors. We were fighting for the island, Christians versus Moors, because we wanted to be in such a privileged location in the middle of the Mediterranean. And when the Christians started winning all the battles, the Moors would stay at they would still have Menorca, which is the island that is right next to Mallorca. And they arranged a treaty in the castle that you can see in the video that would start a relationship under that the Moors that were living in Menorca would kind of be part of the Christian empire, and they would have to pay them taxes, so they could keep being the power for just Menorca for a couple of years, and then we just conquer them all.
I wanted to conclude my video up here, overlooking the Moorish Tower in the background of the Mediterranean Sea. The rapid growth of Islam had multiple and many factors, and it could be said that by bloodshed and sword. There's a lot of truth to that. And their militaries were extremely talented, and they were not large groups of people. They were outnumbered in many instances, but they were extremely strategic. And you could say that maybe there is a God factor in it. And the Old Testament did say there would be many nations, and if you do believe in God, you could easily come to the conclusion that God was behind the war and God was with them. There was also diplomacy, there was faith, there was ministry, as you could put it, where people were traveling to towns as Islamic people along the trade routes, and they were occupying them virtually and integrating their culture. But the rapid growth of Islam is something that is significant in shaping history and continues to do so.